For more insight on the latest developments, we're joined by geopolitical analyst Elyader live from Isfahan, Iran. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Sir, Iran has warned against the presence of extra-regional powers in the Strait of Hormuz. What message is Tehran sending to Western countries following the recent statements by France and the United Kingdom?
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Ms. Fiza. Honestly, the Foreign Ministry has already issued a statement and stated that adventurous claims or any kind of on the Strait of Hormuz will be done by Iran and regional players, namely Oman, the coastal states of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has already seen what foreign interference can bring to our region and our borders and our country. It was met with a war of aggression through foreign powers, namely the United States and Israel. Therefore, Iran is not going to risk the same cycles as before. It wants to abide by the parameters set in the MOU that clearly calls for the coordination of the Strait of Hormuz to be done between Iran and Oman. And I think Western powers, the Americans, are still trying to use their imperial approaches and coerce and pressure countries like Oman to abide by their so-called rule of law. But Iran identifies these dangers and again wants to abide by the MOU it achieved. Iran was the warring party that caused disruptions of the global oil trade or energy markets or fertilizer markets through the Strait of Hormuz. It was the aggressive party acting out by inflicting an illegal war of aggression against Iran. Therefore, Iran's statements are clear. It does not appreciate these kind of statements made by the Europeans.
All right, sir. Iran has begun negotiations with Japanese oil companies under a U.S. sanctions waiver. Could this mark the beginning of Iran's gradual return to international energy markets? And how significant do you think is Japan's interest?
Yes, Iran is returning to a little bit of normalcy by being in the global energy markets and global oil markets. However, even prior to the sanctions relief, prior to the 40-day war, Iran had structured steps to sell its oil by basically curtailing ways to avoid sanctions. However, it was more difficult to operate, but it was already in the energy markets, albeit it being indirectly. During the war, under the pressure that the global oil markets were feeling, the Americans decided strategically maybe it's better to allow for the sanctions relief to start even during the war. So Iran was already making oil sales, legitimate non-sanctioned oil sales during the war. It was in the energy markets. The significance of Japan is that the Iranian strategic success, the realities in the Strait of Hormuz, have made maybe traditional allies of the Americans like the Japanese realize that working in collaboration with Iran perhaps will meet their oil and security needs better than putting all their eggs in the American imperial basket. The Japanese perhaps want to are taking a more pragmatic approach, a realistic approach, seeing that maybe working with Iran is more wise. The Americans have provided insecurity, even for Japanese and Far East markets. There were reports of American defense missiles, Patriot missiles, being sent from Japan to protect Israel. So I think the Japanese, perhaps later the South Koreans, will realize that perhaps working with Iran is better. Plus, it also complements the matters in the MOU that also requires for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. I think it's significant because it's new oil markets for Iran.
All right, who actually holds power in Iran during a transition like this? Is succession a straightforward constitutional process, or is it ultimately decided behind closed doors?
No, the Iranian constitution is quite open for people to see and analyze. It does not need to happen behind closed doors. The succession, even after the death of the late Imam Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, rahmatullah alayh, it was a council of three, which was stipulated in the constitution, uh, and this council met, and then the Guardian Council, appointed with the help of this Security Council, helped appoint his son as the heir to the revolution and Imam Khamenei. Therefore, no, I don't think it's something that happens behind closed doors. It's out for everybody to see. And I think this intact, legitimate process that was successful not to collapse internally, this process was strong enough for their Iranian people to trust in this process and rally behind the flag. Even if they had differences, they woke up to the strength and resilience of the Iranian revolution, its system, and it was intact militarily, even in terms of its population. Therefore, and the military success was also shown to the world. Iran retaliated strongly and fiercely and achieved military gains, diplomatic gains, and geo-economic gains. Therefore, I don't think anything is hidden. Everything is on display.
All right. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has rejected President Trump's remarks on Iran's food situation. What does this exchange tell us about the current state of United States and Iran relations despite ongoing negotiations?
I think it's in terms of the United States and Iran and their ongoing negotiations. If the United States wakes up from its denial, realizes that it made a miscalculation, it bit off more than it could chew, it capitulated in a way by signing an MOU, which they signed and adhered to, and it was wise perhaps because at least a temporary ceasefire and a temporary sense of normalcy in some way was achieved. But the Americans, if they want to have their excessive demands, state false claims of Iran having to buy American commodities with their unfrozen assets, Iran does not need to make concessions beyond the MOU. It was the strategic victorious party in the war of aggression imposed against it. It realized a geo-economic dominance, a geographical dominance, a geopolitical dominance by gaining control of the Strait of Hormuz as a matter of national security, because it was met with aggression in these straits and waterways. And therefore, Iran, even if it doesn't dictate its conditions and terms, at least it's abiding by the MOU and the parameters and frameworks set by the MOU that was mediated by Pakistan. It's the Americans that drift away from the MOU, want to sabotage it, coerce and pressure GCC countries to make false allegations and claims, sign side agreements with Lebanon illegitimately, without taking into consideration Israeli evacuation from South Lebanon, which is the first point in the MOU. And obviously, these adventurisms that are taken forward by the Americans and these drifting away from the main structure of the MOU only causes more concern for the global economy. And as President Trump said previously, he doesn't want to be remembered as President Hoover, who caused the first Great Depression in the early 20th century. This Great Depression will be worse than the previous one. And I think the Americans have to wake up if they want to salvage global security, salvage their own reputation and their own economy as well. So negotiations will only succeed if people and parties are realistic and accept the truth and the realities on the ground right now.
You had to be very precise, looking beyond the emotional attachment, emotional sentiment attached and religious sentiment attached with the funeral. What is the biggest geopolitical consequence, in your opinion, that the international community may be underestimating right now?
I think a couple of things. First of all, they're underestimating Iran's resistance and resistance and strength in terms of maintaining their security for their country. I think perhaps some of the international community still might underestimate that, especially the Americans and Israelis. Another thing that this funeral will show is it perhaps might be a referendum for displaying the people's unity and support of the Islamic Republic. There was a recent registration in Iran. I don't know how to translate it exactly. It was called Jan Fada, which means sacrificing your life for the country. And you were allowed to register that in case there was a war, you would be able to be alongside the military forces on the front line. Over 40 million Iranians registered, taking into consideration the young people who can't register and some of the people who still might support the revolution but didn't register. You're looking at 60-70% plus of the population. And the population that will gather around this funeral is also another show and referendum of the people's support of this revolution. People across the world, including the small minority misguided Iranian opposition, will see on display the real, true majority support of the Islamic Republic. The world and even the Iranian people woke up to the fact that the blood of their martyred leader, their schoolgirls in Minab, only served to strengthen the Iranian resolve to unite the country. And that's the reality that the world should not underestimate. It's the reality that exists right now.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable feedback.